The first time Silas Mercer met Hannah Reed, she pointed a shotgun at his chest and told him to get off her father's land. It was not the sort of introduction Silas was accustomed to. Most women in Red Hollow smiled before he had even spoken. Some adjusted their dresses when he entered a room. Others suddenly discovered reasons to stand near him at church socials, cattle auctions, or winter dances. Their mothers were often worse. They spoke loudly about family fortunes, respectable bloodlines, and daughters who had been raised properly. Silas had heard it all. At 37, he owned nearly 12,000 acres of Wyoming grassland, more cattle than some men saw in a lifetime, and shares in a freight company that supplied 3 growing towns. People called him the Mercer King. Silas hated the name. He had spent years learning that wealth made people unusually interested in a man, while knowing almost nothing about him. So when Hannah Reed stood barefoot in wet grass, her brown hair coming loose from a braid, an old shotgun held firmly against her shoulder, Silas did something he had not done around a woman in years. He laughed. Her eyes narrowed. "I don't see what's funny." Silas raised both hands. "Nothing, ma'am." "Then stop smiling." That only made it harder. Behind Hannah stood a small farmhouse that had seen better years. One corner of the porch sagged. Several roof shingles were missing. A chicken wandered beneath an overturned wagon wheel as though it owned the property. Silas looked toward the creek behind him. "That steer belongs to me." "I know." The answer surprised him. That morning, one of Silas's young bulls had broken through a damaged fence after a thunderstorm. Silas had followed its tracks nearly 4 miles before finding it calmly eating grass beside the Reed family barn. "If you know," he said carefully, "then I suppose I've come to collect him." "You suppose wrong." Silas stared at her. Hannah lowered the shotgun slightly, but not much. "That bull tore through our bean patch, broke part of the fence, and scared my father badly enough that he fell trying to get out of its way." Silas's amusement vanished. "Was he hurt?" "His shoulder." "Badly?" "He says no, which usually means yes." Silas glanced toward the house. "Let me see him." "No." Now Silas was beginning to understand that Hannah Reed possessed a talent few people around him dared practice. She told him no without apology. "I can send our doctor," he offered. "We have a doctor. I'll pay whatever damage the animal caused." She finally lowered the gun. "You'll repair the fence." Silas blinked. "I beg your pardon." "You heard me. I can pay someone to repair it." "That isn't what I said." For several seconds, the richest rancher in Red Hollow simply looked at her. Hannah leaned the shotgun against the porch rail. "If one of our cows broke onto Mercer land, I doubt you'd be satisfied if I threw money at your foreman and rode away." "That depends how much money you threw." She did not smile. Silas cleared his throat. "Fair enough." The strange thing was that he could have refused. He had men waiting at his ranch hands who could rebuild the reed fence in less than an hour. Instead, Silas removed his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and followed Hannah toward the damaged field. Perhaps curiosity made him do it. Perhaps embarrassment. Or perhaps, though he would not admit it yet, he simply wanted to know what she would say next. Her father, Walter Reed, was sitting beside the kitchen stove when Silas finally met him. Walter was a thin man in his late 50s, with gray beginning to overtake the red in his beard. His right arm rested stiffly against his side. "I told Hannah I'm fine," Walter said. "And I told him stubbornness isn't medicine," Hannah replied. A boy of about 15 sat nearby, sharpening a small pocket knife. "That's my brother Toby," Hannah said. Toby looked Silas over. "You really own all those black cattle west of the ridge?" "Most of them." "How many?" "Toby," Hannah warned. Silas smiled. "A little over 4,000. The knife stopped moving. Toby stared at him as if Silas had just announced he owned the moon. Hannah, however, seemed completely unimpressed. She placed a bowl of stew on the table. "You're staying for supper." Silas looked at her. "Is that another order? You worked on that fence for 3 hours. You made certain of it. And you're covered in mud. Also you're doing." This time Hannah almost smiled. Almost. It was enough to make something unfamiliar stir inside him. Silas stayed. The meal was plain: beef stew, bread, boiled potatoes, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. It was also the most comfortable meal Silas could remember eating in years. No one asked about his railroad shares. Walter wanted to know whether the spring rains had damaged the North Valley. Toby asked Silas why horses sometimes refused to cross running water. Hannah complained that the general store had raised flour prices again. At one point, she looked at Silas's blistered palm. "You hold fence pliers like a banker." "I'm beginning to regret fixing that fence myself." "You're the one who agreed." "You were holding a shotgun." "I had already put it down." I remained frightened. Walter laughed so hard he grabbed his shoulder and immediately regretted it. Hannah gave Silas a look that was supposed to be annoyed, but he saw warmth beneath it. He carried that look with him when he rode home after dark. 3 nights later, Silas attended a dinner at Judge Caldwell's house. Crystal glasses covered the table. Imported candles burned in silver holders. A piano played softly in the adjoining room. Beside Silas sat Lydia Caldwell, the judge's beautiful daughter, wearing a green silk dress brought from St. Louis. For 6 months, half the town had quietly predicted Silas would marry her. Lydia leaned closer. "Father says you're considering building another house near the southern pasture." "I mentioned it once. You should build something larger than your present home, perhaps with a proper ballroom." Silas looked down at his plate. A ballroom. He suddenly remembered Hannah standing beside a broken fence with mud on her cheek. Lydia continued speaking about curtains. Silas hardly heard her. He realized with some surprise that he would rather be sitting at the Reed family table drinking terrible coffee. The thought followed him home. Then it followed him through the next morning. By afternoon, Silas had found an excuse. He rode to the Reed farm carrying a small wooden box. Hannah met him beside the barn. "What's that?" "Something for your father." Her expression immediately cooled. Silas opened the box. Inside was a leather shoulder brace recommended by the ranch doctor. Hannah stared at it. "I told you we weren't taking charity." "It isn't charity." "What would you call it?" Silas hesitated. "A peace offering." "For what?" "The beans." She looked toward the ruined garden. Then back at him. "You already repaired the fence." "I know." "Then we're even." She started walking away. Silas closed the box. "Hannah." She turned. People almost never walked away while he was speaking. "You dislike me," he said. Her eyebrows rose. "I barely know you. Most people decide they like me considerably faster. Most people know how much land you own. That struck deeper than she intended. Silas became quiet. Hannah noticed. For the first time, some of the hardness left her expression. "My father can use the brace," she said, "but you'll let him pay you for it." Silas nearly argued, then stopped himself. "All right. And don't charge him ranch doctor prices." "I wouldn't dare." She took the box. Silas should have left then. Instead, he noticed Toby fighting with the hinge of the barn door. "I can fix that." Hannah looked at his hands. "The fence gave you 3 blisters." 2. 3. One was hardly a blister. She stared at him for another moment. Then she handed him the hammer. By sunset, the hinge was fixed badly. Silas had struck his thumb once, and Hannah had laughed at him twice. He rode home smiling. He returned the following week. And the week after that. Sometimes he brought nothing. Sometimes he helped Walter mend equipment. Sometimes he sat on the porch while Toby talked endlessly about horses. But mostly, he came because Hannah Reed never became nervous around him. She disagreed when she thought he was wrong. She ignored him when work needed doing. She never asked him for money. And when she looked at him, Silas slowly began to realize she was searching for something entirely different from what every elegant woman in Red Hollow seemed to see. Not Mercer Ranch. Not 4,000 cattle. Not his freight company. Him. Then, one warm evening in June, Silas arrived at the Reed farm and found Hannah standing beside the empty chicken yard, her face white with anger. Walter was sitting on the porch holding a folded paper. Toby would not meet Silas's eyes. Silas dismounted slowly. "What happened?" Hannah looked at him. For the first time since they had met, there was fear behind her stubborn expression. "My father has been keeping something from us." Walter lowered his head. Hannah held out the paper. "The bank says we have 60 days. Silas took it. He read the amount written at the bottom. Then he looked toward the small farmhouse, the damaged fields, and the family that had somehow begun to matter to him. The Reed farm was about to be taken from them. And Silas already knew the easiest way to save it. What he did not yet understand was that offering that help could cost him Hannah forever. Silas read the bank notice twice. The amount was not large to him. That was the dangerous part. He could settle it before breakfast the next morning and scarcely notice the money missing. Walter Reed could not. The older man sat on the porch with his injured arm tucked close to his body, staring toward the fields as though the answer might be hidden somewhere beyond the fence. "I borrowed after my wife died," Walter finally said. "Bad winter, feed was high, Hannah was 16, Toby was still small enough to sleep through a blizzard." Hannah folded her arms. "You should have told me. I meant to pay it before you ever needed to know." "But you didn't." Walter flinched. Hannah immediately looked away. Her anger was not really meant for him. Silas understood that. Fear had simply found the nearest door. "How much can you raise?" Silas asked. Walter rubbed his jaw. "Not enough." Silas looked at Hannah. "Then let me pay it." The words were simple. Her reaction was not. "No." "Hannah." "I said no." Walter started to speak, but she lifted a hand. Silas stepped closer. "This is not a sack of flour or a shoulder brace. You could lose your home." "I know exactly what we could lose." "Then why refuse help?" "Because your kind of help comes too easily." Something hardened in his face. My kind. You can solve every problem in this valley by opening a ledger. That doesn't make the solution wrong. No, but it can make a person forget what the solution costs someone else. Silas stared at her. I'm asking nothing from you. Maybe not today. The words landed harder than she intended. He went still. Hannah regretted them immediately, but she did not take them back. She had spent too many years watching desperate people become grateful people, and grateful people become people who felt they no longer had the right to say no. Silas removed his hat. You think I would buy your affection? I think neither of us knows yet what you would expect after saving everything my family owns. I would expect nothing. That is easy to promise when the money means nothing to you. Silas's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would leave angry. Instead, he nodded once. All right. That surprised her. No argument. I've discovered arguing with you rarely improves my position. Walter gave a tired laugh. Hannah did not. Silas put his hat back on. But 60 days is 60 days. Pride does not change arithmetic. I know. If you decide you need me. I won't. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I hope you prove me unnecessary. He rode away. For the next week, Hannah barely saw him. Part of her was relieved. Another part noticed every afternoon when no horse appeared on the road. She hated that part. She threw herself into work. She sold extra eggs in town. She took sewing from 3 families. She convinced Walter to let her sell one of the milk cows, though he protested for nearly an hour. Toby began taking small jobs, repairing tack and brushing horses at the livery stable. Still, the numbers refused to become kind. Then, on a Thursday morning, Hannah rode into Red Hollow with 2 baskets of butter and found Silas outside the freight office. He was talking with a broad-shouldered man wearing railroad boots and a dusty vest. Silas saw her. He did not wave. He simply finished his conversation. That restraint caught her attention. When the other man left, Silas crossed the street. You look suspicious, Hannah said. I've been told my face naturally creates that effect. What were you arranging? Nothing for you. That answer makes me more suspicious. Silas sighed. The freight camps east of town are short on food suppliers. Their current contract ends next week. Hannah narrowed her eyes. You told them about us. I told their quartermaster there were farms nearby that might be able to supply butter, eggs, bread, and mending. Did you mention my name? No. She searched his face. Why not? Because you told me you don't need my voice added to yours. The answer silenced her. Silas pointed toward the freight office. If you want the contract, go inside and earn it. And if I do, then I will have wasted 5 minutes talking to a man with terrible breath. Hannah almost laughed. Almost. She went inside. An hour later, she came back out holding a handwritten agreement. Silas was still across the street. He pretended not to have been waiting. Well, he asked. 3 deliveries each week. His face brightened. At what price? More than I expected. Did you bargain? Of course. I pity the man. You should. For the first time since the bank notice, Hannah smiled without effort. Silas looked at her a moment too long. She noticed. He noticed that she noticed. Neither mentioned it. The new contract did not solve everything, but it gave the Reeds something they had not possessed a week earlier. A chance. That same afternoon, another opportunity appeared. Toby was working behind the livery when a nervous bay mare kicked free from a hitching rail. Two men jumped back. Toby moved forward. Silas, standing nearby, watched the boy approach without a rope. "Toby," Hannah called. The boy raised one hand. The mare's nostrils flared. Toby spoke softly. No one heard the words. He moved slowly enough that the horse stopped backing away. Then he touched her neck. Within a minute, the mare stood still. Silas looked toward Hannah. How long has he been able to do that? Since he was little. He has remarkable hands. He has patience. That too. 2 days later, a horse breeder named Grant Hollister appeared at the Reed farm. Hannah immediately suspected Silas. Hollister watched Toby work with a young gelding for half an hour, then offered the boy paid work 3 mornings a week. "I need someone who listens before he pulls," Hollister said. "Most young men do the opposite." Toby looked as if he had forgotten how to speak. After Hollister left, Hannah found Silas repairing a gate. "You did that." "He kept working. I mentioned the boy." "You arranged it." "No." Silas set down the hammer. "I told Hollister what I saw. He came because good horsemen are difficult to find. Toby earned the offer himself." Hannah studied him. This was different. Silas had opened a door. He had not carried them through it. "Thank you," she said. He looked genuinely surprised. "You're welcome." If you were in Hannah's place, would you have refused Silas's money too, even with the farm at risk? Sometimes the hardest kind of help to accept is the kind that can quietly change the balance between two people. By July, the Reed farm was busier than ever. Hannah rose before sunrise to churn butter for the freight camps. Toby spent mornings with Hollister's horses. Walter's shoulder improved enough that he could handle lighter work. And Silas became part of their days without anyone quite deciding when it had happened. He repaired the chicken shed. Badly. Hannah made him redo one wall. He came back the next morning and did. He learned to split firewood without striking the same piece 4 times. He even stopped wearing expensive shirts when he visited. Then came the founders' ball. Silas had no desire to attend. His Aunt Margaret Mercer had other ideas. "You cannot disappear into the countryside every evening and expect people not to talk," she told him. "People talk when I stay home. They talk differently now." Silas knew what she meant. Hannah, by then Red Hollow, had noticed. At the ball, Lydia Caldwell found him beside the piano. She wore pale gold this time. "My father says you've become attached to a farm girl." Silas's expression cooled. "Your father discusses my personal life often. He discusses your business life. Apparently they are becoming the same subject." "What does that mean?" Lydia lowered her voice. "There are men considering investments with your freight company, men who expected you to marry within certain circles." Silas almost laughed. "They intend to choose my wife along with my shipping routes. They intend to protect their money." "And you?" Lydia glanced toward the dancers. "I intend to avoid marrying a man who looks this miserable when standing beside me." That surprised him. She smiled faintly. "Do not mistake me, Silas. I like you, but I have no wish to become another possession on Mercer Ranch." Before he could answer, the room shifted. Heads turned toward the entrance. Silas followed their gaze. Hannah stood there. She had come only to deliver 6 jars of preserves ordered by the hotel kitchen next door, but one of the servants had mistakenly directed her through the ballroom. Her dress was plain blue cotton. A small flower mark remained near one cuff. She froze when dozens of wealthy faces turned toward her. Then she saw Silas. He walked across the room without hesitation. "Hannah, I was given the wrong door. I'm glad." She looked around. "I'm not." Whispers had already begun. Silas extended his hand. "Dance with me." Her eyes widened. "Absolutely not." "Why?" "Because half this room is waiting to see whether I know which fork belongs beside a soup bowl." "I don't know either." "You have servants who know for you." Silas smiled. "Hannah." She looked at his offered hand. Then at the room. Then back at him. Slowly, she placed her fingers in his. The music continued. Silas led her onto the floor. And across the ballroom, Margaret Mercer watched them with an expression Hannah could not read. Not anger. Not exactly. Fear. Later that night, after Hannah had gone, Margaret closed the library door behind Silas. "You care for that girl?" It was not a question. "Yes." His aunt's face tightened. "Then you need to understand something before you carry this any further." Silas poured himself water. "What?" Margaret stared into the darkened hall. "Your father once did this exact thing." Silas stopped. "What are you talking about?" She turned toward him. "And the woman he chose nearly lost everything because of this family." For the first time that evening, Silas forgot Hannah, the dance, the whispers, and every business concern waiting on his desk. Because his father had been dead 12 years. And no one had ever told Silas there had been another woman. Silas did not sit down. "What woman?" Margaret Mercer remained beside the library door, one hand resting on the brass handle as if she might leave before answering. Her name was Rose Bennett. Silas searched his memory. Nothing. Who was she? A seamstress. He almost laughed from disbelief. My father. Yes. Margaret crossed the room slowly. This was before he married your mother. Rose came from a farming family outside Cheyenne. Your father loved her, or believed he did. When his own father learned about it, he threatened to cut him out of the cattle business unless he ended things. Silas felt something cold settle beneath his ribs. And he obeyed. Eventually. Margaret looked toward the dying fire. But not before Rose became known all over town as the woman trying to trap a Mercer. Silas's face hardened. Was she? No. The answer came quickly. She never asked him for money, never asked him to marry her. She actually tried to leave when the gossip started. Margaret's voice grew quieter. But your father kept telling her he would handle it. Silas already knew what came next. He didn't. No. Rose's family lost customers. People stopped buying her sewing. Their landlord refused to renew their lease. Every kindness your father tried to offer only made the rumors worse because people said it proved she had attached herself to him for money. Silas stared at his aunt. What happened to her? She left Wyoming. Where? I never knew. The fire cracked softly. Margaret finally faced him. That is why I looked afraid tonight when you danced with Hannah, not because she is poor, not because I think less of her. She stepped closer. I am afraid this town will punish her for being loved by you. Silas said nothing. For the first time, the whispers at the ball no longer seemed harmless. He remembered Hannah walking into that room with flour on her cuff. He remembered heads turning. The smiles. The measuring looks. He had thought taking her hand showed courage. Now he wondered whether he had placed a target on her back. The trouble began 2 days later. Hannah arrived at the general store and found her usual butter order reduced by half. Nothing personal, Mr. Jennings told her without meeting her eyes, just business. The seamstress who had promised Hannah winter work suddenly claimed she had enough help. Then one of the freight camp deliveries was delayed because a clerk had misplaced her invoice. Individually, each problem meant little. Together, they formed a pattern. Hannah noticed. So did Silas. His response was immediate. He rode into town and entered the freight office with the kind of expression that made grown men straighten their backs. The missing invoice was found within minutes. Then he visited Jennings. By evening, the butter order was restored. When Hannah learned what he had done, she rode straight to Mercer Ranch. Silas found her in the stable yard. You went to Jennings? Yes. You went to the freight office? Yes. Did I ask you to? No. His certainty irritated her more than an excuse would have. You still don't understand. I understand perfectly. They were hurting you because of me. And so you frightened them into behaving. I reminded them of their obligations. You reminded them who owns half the business in this town. Silas took a breath. What would you prefer I do? Watch quietly while people punish you? I would prefer you ask me. The words stopped him. Hannah stepped closer. You keep saying you respect me, Silas, but every time something frightens you, you become the Mercer King again. He hated the name even more coming from her. I was trying to protect you. So was your father. Silas's expression changed. She did not know the full story, but Margaret had told Walter enough for the truth to travel. Hannah saw immediately that she had struck the wound beneath his anger. Still, she continued. Protection without choice is still control. Silas looked away. The stable yard suddenly seemed too quiet. I cannot stand by and let them destroy your family. My family survived before you rode onto our land. And what if this becomes worse? Then we face it. We. Hannah hesitated. That single word changed the air between them. Silas looked at her. For weeks, everything they had avoided saying seemed to rise at once. Yes, she said quietly, we. He moved half a step toward her. Hannah did not move away. But before either could say more, a rider came hard through the main gate. It was Silas's foreman. Mr. Mercer. Silas turned. What is it? Telegram from Cheyenne. The man handed it over. Silas opened it. His expression darkened as he read. What? Hannah asked. Silas folded the paper. One of my freight partners is pulling out. Because of me. Because I refused an arrangement he wanted. Which arrangement? Silas did not answer quickly enough. Hannah understood. Lydia Caldwell. It was never an engagement. But people expected one. Yes. And your partners expected it too. Yes. Hannah looked toward the grand Mercer house beyond the stable. For the first time, she saw clearly just how far his life reached. Rail contracts, banks, judges, investors, families who treated marriage like another signature on a business agreement. Silas stepped closer. This changes nothing. It changes something. Not for me. That is the problem. Her voice was quiet now. You can afford to say that. Silas flinched. Hannah turned toward her horse. Hannah. She stopped. If you care for me, he said, do not let other people decide what we are allowed to become. She looked back at him. And if you care for me, don't ask me to pretend those people have no power over my life. Then she mounted and rode away. The next several weeks were the hardest either of them had known since meeting. Silas stopped interfering. That was far more difficult than he expected. When the Reed freight payment arrived late again, he said nothing. Hannah rode to the office herself and stayed until the clerk corrected it. When Jennings reduced his order a second time, she found two families willing to buy directly from the farm. She began selling preserves beside the church on Saturdays. Slowly, stubbornly, the debt shrank. Silas helped only when asked. A broken wagon axle. A leaking section of roof. 2 days helping Walter bring in hay before an approaching storm. He gave his labor, not his money. And Hannah noticed the difference. One evening, after they finished stacking the last hay beneath the barn roof, she handed him a cup of water. You've improved. At hay. At listening. Silas wiped sweat from his forehead. I find it considerably harder than hammering. That explains why you're better at it. He laughed. She did too. For one small moment, the distance between them disappeared. If you have ever cared about someone strong enough to want to solve every problem for them, Hannah's choice is worth remembering. Sometimes love is not stepping in. Sometimes it is trusting them enough to stand nearby. By late August, only a portion of the debt remained. For the first time, Walter believed they might actually save the farm. Then Toby came running from the road one afternoon. Hannah. She dropped the basket she was carrying. What happened? Toby held a paper in one shaking hand. The bank moved the date. What? They say father violated a condition in the loan. Walter came out behind her. That's impossible. Hannah read the notice. The remaining balance was no longer due in 3 weeks. It was due in 5 days. And if they failed, the property would be auctioned. Silas arrived less than an hour later. He read the paper. This is deliberate. Hannah's face was pale. Can they do it? I don't know. Don't buy the farm. His eyes lifted. I didn't say I would. You were thinking it. Silas could not deny it. Walter sank onto the porch chair. Toby stood beside him, silent. Silas looked at the three of them. Then back at the notice. I know someone in Cheyenne who understands bank contracts. Hannah's eyes sharpened. A lawyer? Yes. Can he tell us whether this is legal? Yes. Then ask him. Silas nodded. Nothing more. He rode through the night. The answer came the next afternoon. And it was worse than any of them expected. The bank could move the date. But that was not what made Silas's blood run cold. Attached to the lawyer's telegram was the name of the man who had quietly purchased the Reed family debt only 2 weeks earlier. Judge Everett Caldwell. Lydia's father. Silas stared at the name. This was no longer about a struggling farm. Someone was using Hannah's home to force his hand. And this time, if Silas made the wrong choice, he would lose far more than money. Silas rode back to the Reed farm before sunset. Hannah knew from his face that the news was bad. Walter stood when Silas entered the kitchen. Toby stopped eating. Silas placed the lawyer's telegram on the table. The bank no longer owns your debt. Hannah looked down at the paper. Who does? Silas hesitated only a second. Judge Caldwell. The room went silent. Walter frowned. Why would a judge buy my farm note? He didn't buy the farm. Silas looked at Hannah. He bought leverage. She understood before her father did. Against you. Yes. Walter's face darkened. You're telling me my children's home is being used to bargain with you. Silas nodded. Hannah gripped the back of a chair. What does Caldwell want? Silas already knew. A railroad partnership. A stronger connection between the Caldwell family and Mercer Holdings. And though it had never been written into any contract, the marriage everyone had expected between Silas and Lydia. He wants control, Silas said. Over what? Me. Hannah stared at him. Then she asked the question Silas had feared since reading the telegram. What happens if you give him what he wants? Walter turned sharply toward her. Silas said nothing. That silence answered enough. No, Hannah said. Hannah. No. She moved around the table. You are not bargaining your life for this farm. I didn't say I would. You considered it. Silas looked directly at her. Yes. Her expression tightened. Then stop. He almost argued. The old instinct rose quickly. He could save them. He could make the problem disappear. But Hannah had spent months teaching him something his wealth had hidden from him for years. A person was not rescued simply because someone stronger made the decision for them. Silas slowly nodded. All right. Walter looked between them. Then what do we do? Hannah picked up the telegram. We prove Caldwell is doing something he has no right to do. Silas looked at her. The faintest smile touched his face. That sounds considerably more like you. The next morning, they rode into Red Hollow together. Not to Judge Caldwell's house. Not yet. They went first to the bank. Hannah asked for every document connected to Walter's loan. The bank manager refused. Silas remained silent. That surprised the man more than any threat could have. Hannah leaned both hands on his desk. My father signed that note. If you claim he violated a condition, show us which one. The manager swallowed. He produced the papers. They spent nearly 2 hours reading them. Then Hannah found it. A date had been altered. Not in Walter's original agreement. In the transfer papers prepared when Caldwell purchased the debt. Silas's lawyer had been right that an accelerated payment could be legal. But only under conditions Walter had actually agreed to. He had agreed to none of these. Silas stared at the page. Can we prove that? Walter reached into his coat. I kept my copy. Hannah looked at him. You kept it. Her father gave a tired shrug. Your mother said, never trust a man who smiles while lending money. For the first time in days, Hannah laughed. By noon, Silas's attorney had arrived from Cheyenne. By 2, the bank manager looked sick. By 3, Judge Caldwell knew they were coming. They found him in his office. Lydia was there too. Her father stood behind a polished desk. "This is a private matter." "No," Lydia said quietly. "It stopped being private when you used my name to justify it." Caldwell glared at her. Silas placed the altered transfer document on the desk. "You purchased Walter Reed's debt. A legal transaction. You changed the collection terms. I exercised my rights. My attorney disagrees." Caldwell's mouth hardened. Then he looked at Hannah. "This entire situation disappears if people return to their proper places." Silas felt anger rise. Hannah spoke first. "What place is mine?" Caldwell looked almost annoyed by the question. "You know perfectly well." "No, Judge, I'd like to hear you say it." He did not. Hannah stepped closer. "You wanted me frightened enough to leave Silas alone." Caldwell remained silent. "And you thought my home was cheap enough to use as a threat." Lydia closed her eyes briefly. Silas looked at the judge. "If you pursue this debt under the altered terms, my attorney files suit tomorrow. Every railroad partner you have will learn why." Caldwell leaned back. "So now you threaten me?" "No." Silas shook his head. "I'm giving you a choice." Then he did something the old Silas Mercer would never have done. He stepped back. Hannah remained in front of the desk. It was her farm. Her fight. Caldwell looked at her. "What do you want?" "The original agreement restored." "Anything else?" "Yes." She pointed toward Walter. "You apologized to my father." The judge stared at her. Walter almost objected. Hannah waited. At last Caldwell looked at the older man. What occurred should not have occurred. Hannah raised an eyebrow. That sounded like a man apologizing to the wallpaper. Lydia covered a smile. Caldwell's face reddened. Then he tried again. "I am sorry, Mr. Reed." Walter nodded once. "Good enough." The farm was safe. Not free of debt. Safe. That distinction mattered to Hannah. She continued supplying the freight camps. Toby's work with Grant Hollister grew into a full apprenticeship. Walter recovered enough to return to the fields, though Hannah caught him rubbing his shoulder whenever rain approached. By winter, the final bank payment was made. No Mercer money had paid it. Silas had helped, but he had not purchased their future. And somewhere during those months, Hannah stopped wondering whether loving him meant losing herself. She had watched him change. Not become poorer. Not pretend his influence did not exist. He had learned when to use it and when to step aside. Silas came to the farm one cold evening after the first snow. Hannah found him inside the barn, trying to repair a stall latch. "You're holding the hammer wrong." He looked over his shoulder. "I have been practicing for months." "That only makes this more disappointing." He smiled. Hannah took the hammer from him, adjusted his grip, then handed it back. Their fingers touched. Neither moved away. Silas set the hammer down. "Hannah." She knew. Perhaps she had known from the moment he arrived. "I spent most of my life believing love became dangerous the moment people wanted something from me," he said. She waited. "Then I met a woman who wanted me to fix her fence." That fence was your fault. I am attempting romance. You should practice that too. Silas laughed softly. Then his expression became serious. I cannot promise people will stop talking. I cannot promise my life will ever become simple. I never asked for simple. I know. He took her hand. I can promise I will never decide what your life ought to be without asking you. Hannah looked down at their joined hands. And if I tell you you're wrong? I have considerable experience with that. She smiled. Silas reached into his coat, but Hannah stopped him. Don't kneel. He froze. I hadn't yet. You were going to. I was. The floor is covered in straw. An excellent observation. She stepped closer. Just ask. So he did. Hannah Reed, will you marry me? She made him wait. Not because she was uncertain. Because after everything he had learned about patience, she thought he deserved one final test. Then she smiled. Yes. If there was one thing worth carrying from Hannah and Silas's story, perhaps it is this. The strongest love is not the one that rescues another person from every struggle. It is the one that leaves them enough dignity to remain fully themselves. They married the following spring. Not in the Mercer mansion. Hannah refused that immediately. They married beside the reed barn beneath newly leafed cottonwoods, with Walter standing proudly near the porch and Toby arriving on a young horse he had trained himself. Lydia attended without her father. She brought Hannah a small parcel. Inside was a pair of work gloves. For when Silas breaks something, Lydia said. Hannah laughed. He usually does. Silas heard them. I am standing directly beside you. That has never prevented the truth, Hannah replied. Their marriage did not turn Hannah into one of Red Hollow's grand ladies. She still worked at the farm. She still negotiated her own prices. She still told Silas when his ideas were foolish. And Silas still owned thousands of acres, cattle, freight interests, and more money than either of them could reasonably spend. But his favorite place was no longer the Mercer house. It was the reed porch he rebuilt that summer. The first attempt leaned badly. Hannah made him tear it down. The second stood straight. One evening they sat there together as the sun dropped behind the Wyoming hills. Silas looked toward the field where his wandering bull had first destroyed the beans. Do you ever think about the day we met? Hannah nodded. I should have charged you more for that fence. Silas smiled. Every wealthy woman in Red Hollow had noticed what Silas Mercer possessed. Hannah Reed had done something none of them had thought to do. She demanded something from him that money could not purchase. Honesty, patience, and the courage to stand beside someone without owning the road beneath her feet. That was how the richest rancher in Red Hollow finally found the one thing his fortune had never been able to buy. A woman who did not need his wealth to choose him. And a home where he never had to wonder why she stayed.